Hi, welcome. You made it through week 2. This is my little schnauzer, by the way. He's wanting to say hi for our video today. I wanted to give you a couple updates on announcements and then also give you a little bit of a preview of things to be thinking about up ahead. So first off, great discussions overall. I'm really impressed with the quality of your writing and a lot of your reflections. Some people have been losing points. I want you to remember, in order for the discussions to be really dynamic and fluid, we need you to log in at least a minimum of 2 different days, 2 different settings, where you're responding also to at least a couple different classmates. And that doesn't mean, oh, I've done my 2, I'm totally done. A lot of awesome discussion posts have come from people that just keep popping in and out throughout the week. So that's what we want as minimum. That doesn't mean, oh, I've done 2, I'm done. Please keep checking in. The next 2 weeks are going to be a lot more videos and just discussions. We want to give you some time to get ready to start thinking ahead. You've got a newsletter that's due later in September, and you can start thinking about that and the different components you would like in a newsletter. And then you also have observations that are due early to mid-November. And you might think, well, that's a long ways away. But it takes a little while to set up your observations, and or if you choose to do the other route and write a 5-page paper and do some research. Either way, it takes you some time. So please use these next 2 weeks to do that. It's a great time to do that. These next chapters, you can be working ahead, but you're also looking right now at chapters 3 and 4 that have to do with the history some more, which we started discussing last week, and then a lot of the major theorists. So as part of your program comparison paper, you could be researching some of these theorists, but then a lot of other major theorists that psychology has brought to the table are ones that I'd like you to spend some more time on as well. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about Jean Piaget, Maria Montessori, and Howard Gardner. So Jean Piaget and Maria Montessori were contemporaries of each other. They were around at the same time. You're going to notice again and again and again a lot of our history as far as the leaders within our field and really the leaders within our country when we think about what's been happening with our presidents and everything else have been of European descent. So our education system is certainly the same. Jean Piaget was Swiss, Maria Montessori was Italian, and so they were both coming out of Europe, and Europe was doing a lot of things that then we, as individuals that a lot of our ancestors came from Europe, they brought that over here with them. So let's start with Jean Piaget. He is considered the father of developmental psychology, so an extremely important character and figure. And he started by working with his own children and looking at all these different stages they went through. I say stage because it's not just that in his mind that we gain more knowledge over time, but we actually think in totally different ways at different points in our lives. And so very bright children, even when they are 2 or 3 years old, they just think differently than children that are 7 or 8. Even if they're really understanding some advanced concepts. So that's the stage piece. And he believed that it was largely universal. So the experiences as far as cognitively or the way children were thinking that happened in the United States versus Italy versus Russia versus anywhere was largely the same. He did a lot of his work then, and it continues to be very popular today. We can see that little infants learn through their senses, right? They're putting everything in their mouth. It's everything that they see and hear and touch and taste and smell. And as they get older, they start understanding themselves as separate of their parents, but they can be quite then egocentric when they're in that early childhood age of, say, 2 to 5 or 6. They're thinking very much so about what they want, but they have a hard time thinking about another person's perspective. And then as they get older, they become more and more like adults in their thinking. They can think a little more abstract and about ideas that aren't related to them, but bigger concepts like, fairness or what's ethical across situations that maybe they haven't experienced personally. That's a bit on Piaget. We know that he sometimes underestimated children and then overestimated kind of teens and adults. So we're not always thinking in these abstract, hypothetical types of ways. And children can start understanding others' perspectives even when they're very little. And we can help them by modeling that, by giving some examples, by doing some role plays, and by really asking them those questions about, oh, how would you feel, if Johnny grabbed your toy or hit you, and talking them through that. Again, it's not going to be, and some children understand it more than others, it's developmentally appropriate for them not to understand it. That's part of that stage of being a bit more egocentric or self-focused. We don't mean that term the way we would for an adult, where he said, oh, so egocentric, right? It is developmentally appropriate. They're just understanding, oh, I'm not my mom, I'm not my dad, I'm me, and this is what I want. And then it's a whole nother leap to think a lot more about another person's perspective. But that's a bit on Jean Piaget. Maria Montessori was looking at very similar things. They were both constructivists, which means philosophically, they believe that how we learn is by doing and experiencing and exploring things ourselves. So we can't just listen to our teachers as adults, or certainly as children. We need hands-on. We need to actually discover it for ourselves. She was the first woman in Italy to receive her medical degree. So she was a doctor. But she also, I would say, as a woman, was relegated to working more with children. And she was working with children that were basically wards of the state. And they were not doing very well cognitively, and a lot of individuals believed that they were slow, that they had an intellectual disability. She discovered, no, there's no disability here. Their disability is their environment. They are in a deprived environment, and they weren't exposed to enough things. And so she created particular materials and an environment where they could reach their fullest potential and their development. So we know Montessori mostly from all of our preschools everywhere, but they go beyond schools, and they are specialized materials at different times, different parts of the lifespan, and the idea that you have to work in order. So certain things, materials would be placed in the classroom until they mastered that, and then they would go on to the next. It's individualized, so they work largely at their own pace. And a lot of it also has to do with the beauty and the aesthetics of the environment. So very much so, the environment is kind of the third teacher. And the teacher looks very different often in Montessori's because they are working with the children on a more individual level and looking at what they can give them within the environment to help them continue to progress and move forward at their own pace. Again, both very influential. Both were born in the very late 1800s and started having a lot of their research come out around the same time, and both constructivists, but two different outcomes. Her work relegated more directly to schools. Jean Piaget's work going further and across more psychological research, but both researching the same things. A couple differences. Jean Piaget believed we learn the most from our same age peers. So by figuring things out together around the same time, we can make a lot of progress. Maria Montessori looked at the influence of older others. And so when you think about a traditional Montessori school, they are in a class for a few years at a time, and so they have the experience of being the younger one and the older one, and often the older being more of the mentor for the younger, and also giving them experience with that environment across time versus one school year. So a contemporary figure, and there's many that you're reading about in your text, but one that I wanted to highlight for you that a lot of educators love is Howard Gardner. So Howard Gardner is based out of Harvard, and he'll probably keep hopefully doing research for many, many years, but he has been around for a long time now, and he discovered and wrote about multiple intelligences. So starting in the 1980s, he researched and discussed 7 types of intelligence. And he didn't come up with these out of nowhere. He came up with these from his research. He looked at neuroscience. He looked at individuals that are called savants today, meaning they have a disability and they also have a particular gift or a particular area of gifts. So that could be an artist that is functionally developmentally disabled or unable to care for themselves in other ways, but really, really gifted in that one area. He also looked at individuals with brain injuries where they might have had major struggles in some areas, but then still profound abilities in others. And so he identified 7 types of intelligence that has expanded to 8 based on his work. And you can read more about that, but some of the things include linguistic, musical, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, which is how we relate with others, and intrapersonal, how we understand ourselves, and more. So think about yourself. Many teachers have developed tools and assessments to try to figure out, what are the areas where their children are higher in terms of intelligence, or might need extra supports as well. And it's a neat thing. I think a lot of individuals that are in the education field like that, because it's less of a here's your number and this is your intelligence. It's more fluid than that, and it looks at how we can best support our learners in the classroom. A little bit like a learning style, if you will, but it's more than that as well. So Howard Gardner continues to be a big mover and shaker in the field, and somebody that teachers definitely use in terms of tools. So with that, I'll leave you back to your videos and your readings for this week. Make sure to be very involved in your discussions. You're going across multiple days. You're looking in your goodie bag for this week, which includes a lot of different videos, and picking some out of that, and paying attention to those different historical and present-day theorists and theories that are so important in our field. I look forward to continuing to work with you, and I hope you have a good upcoming week.